A studio executive confronted Clint Eastwood with unwelcome news. Audiences won't like this dark ending. We need changes. In response, Clint threatened to destroy the film rather than compromise. The studio's ultimate decision became legendary in Hollywood. In a Warner Brothers screening room in Burbank, California, during December 1991, Clint Eastwood presented the rough cut of Unforgiven to studio executives. This was the film he'd been attempting to make for a decade, a project that would either become his masterpiece or end his career. It would prove whether his storytelling instincts were correct or whether the studios understood audiences better. When the lights came up, nobody spoke. The uncomfortable silence lingered. Unforgiven departed from everything Clint had created previously and from any Western made in recent decades. It was dark, violent, and morally ambiguous in ways that deeply unsettled executives. The protagonist wasn't heroic. He was a broken alcoholic forced back into killing by poverty and desperation. The violence lacked glamour. Instead, it was ugly, brutal, and carried weight. The conclusion wasn't triumphant but hollow and sad, offering neither redemption nor hope. It represented everything Hollywood Westerns traditionally avoided, everything test audiences typically rejected, and everything studio executives feared would alienate mainstream moviegoers. Clint sat at the back of the screening room, waiting patiently with an unreadable expression. At 61 years old, with 20 years of directing experience through Malpaso Productions, he had complete creative control written into every contract. However, he still needed Warner Brothers to distribute and market the film properly. Judging from their expressions, the executives appeared more than concerned. They looked alarmed. The head of distribution, a man we'll call Robert Kellerman, broke the uncomfortable silence first. Clint, it's powerful work, really powerful. But I have some concerns about the commercial viability of certain elements. What elements? Clint asked neutrally. The ending, primarily, Kellerman said, choosing his words carefully. It's very dark, very violent. The protagonist kills multiple people in cold blood, including an unarmed man. Then he rides away, and we're told through text that he disappeared, presumably to live out his days. There's no redemption arc, no real resolution. That's the point, Clint said. I understand artistically, Kellerman continued, but from a commercial standpoint, audiences expect certain things from a Clint Eastwood Western. They expect the hero to be heroic. They expect justice. They expect a happy ending. A satisfying ending, Kellerman corrected. Not necessarily happy, but satisfying. This feels unfinished, like we cut away before the real ending. The VP of production added their concerns. The violence is also extremely graphic. When Ned is whipped to death, when your character shoots the unarmed saloon owner, it's very brutal. We're concerned about the rating, about whether audiences will be comfortable with that level of realism. It's supposed to be uncomfortable, Clint said. That's the entire point of the film. Violence has consequences. Killing people changes you. This isn't a shoot-'em-up adventure. It's about the cost of violence. Kellerman leaned forward. Clint, I respect what you're going for, but we have $14 million invested in this film. We need it to perform. And right now, I'm not confident that mainstream audiences will embrace something this dark and this morally complex. We need to discuss some adjustments. What kind of adjustments? Clint asked, though his tone suggested he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. The ending needs work, Kellerman said. Maybe money doesn't kill the unarmed man. Maybe he shows mercy, proving he's changed. Maybe we add a scene showing him successfully living peacefully with his children, giving the audience hope, something to balance the darkness. You want me to change the ending? Clint said flatly. We want you to enhance the ending, Kellerman replied. Give audiences something to hold on to. Right now, they're going to walk out feeling depressed and empty. That's not what people go to Clint Eastwood Westerns for. Clint stood up. We need to have a different conversation in my office tomorrow morning at 9. He walked out of the screening room without another word. The next morning, Kellerman and 2 other executives arrived at Clint's office at Malpaso Productions. Clint was already there with his longtime producer and attorney. The atmosphere was tense before anyone spoke. Let me be very clear about something, Clint began, skipping pleasantries. I've been trying to make this film for 10 years. David Webb Peoples wrote the script in the mid-1980s, and I knew immediately it was special. But I also knew I wasn't old enough yet to play William Money properly. I waited. I waited until I was old enough, until I looked weathered enough, until I had lived enough to understand what this character carries. I waited until I had the power and the resources to make it exactly the way it needed to be made. This film is exactly what I intended. Every frame, every line, every moment of violence, every moment of moral complexity, every uncomfortable truth. This is the film. Clint, Kellerman started, we're not trying to destroy your vision. We're trying to help you reach a wider audience. Small adjustments. There are no small adjustments, Clint interrupted. You change the ending, you destroy the entire film. The whole point is that violence doesn't lead to redemption or peace. William Money kills those men not because it's heroic, but because he's still the same killer he always was. He doesn't change. He doesn't get better. He just survives. That's the truth of what violence does to people. But audiences don't want that truth, the VP of production said. They want to see the hero triumph. They want to feel good when they leave the theater. Then they can watch a different movie, Clint said. This movie tells the truth. And if Warner Brothers isn't comfortable distributing a film that tells the truth, then Warner Brothers doesn't have to distribute it. The executives exchanged glances. This was becoming more confrontational than they had anticipated. Are you threatening to take the film to another distributor? Kellerman asked carefully. No, Clint said. I'm saying that if you require changes to the ending, the violence, or the tone, then I will shelve the film. I will lock it in a vault. No one will ever see it. I'd rather have no film than a compromised film. Clint, be reasonable, Kellerman said, though his confidence was faltering. You can't seriously be willing to discard 2 years of work and $14 million because we're suggesting minor improvements to enhance the film's commercial viability. They're not improvements, Clint said, his voice quiet but unwavering. They're compromises, and I don't compromise on the things that matter. This film matters. It says something important about violence, about the West, about the myths we tell ourselves. You change the ending, you turn it into just another Western where the good guy wins and everyone goes home happy. That's not the film I made. Clint's attorney interjected. Gentlemen, I want to remind you that Mr. Eastwood's contract with Warner Brothers gives him final cut approval on all Malpaso productions. This isn't actually a negotiation. Mr. Eastwood is informing you of his decision, not asking for your permission. Kellerman's face flushed. Final cut doesn't mean we have to release a film we don't believe in. If Clint refuses to make reasonable adjustments, Warner Brothers can choose not to distribute. Then don't, Clint said simply. I'd rather the film never be seen than be seen in a compromised form. I've made over 20 films. I'll make more, but I won't make them badly just to satisfy executives who think they know better than I do what my film should be. The standoff continued for a long moment. Kellerman was calculating, trying to determine if Clint was bluffing, if he could be pressured, if there was any way to win this confrontation. But Clint wasn't bluffing. Everyone in the room understood this. He'd walked away from Warner Brothers once before in 1968 and built Malpaso Productions into one of Hollywood's most successful companies. He didn't need Warner Brothers. They needed him. Can we take 24 hours to discuss internally? Kellerman finally asked. Take all the time you need, Clint said. The film doesn't change either way. After the executives left, Clint's producer turned to him. You really willing to shelve it? Absolutely, Clint said without hesitation. I didn't wait 10 years to make a compromised version. It's this film or no film. A day later, Kellerman called. Warner Brothers would distribute Unforgiven exactly as Clint had cut it. No changes to the ending, no softening of the violence, no redemption arc. The studio was wagering $14 million that Clint understood his audience better than they did. Unforgiven was released in August 1992. The marketing campaign emphasized the dark, revisionist nature of the film. This wasn't your grandfather's Western. This was something new, something real, something uncompromising. Critics were stunned. Review after review praised the film's moral complexity, its unflinching portrayal of violence, its refusal to provide easy answers. The ending that Warner Brothers had wanted to change, William Money killing an unarmed man and riding away into darkness, was singled out as one of the most powerful conclusions in Western history. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars. The New York Times called it a masterpiece. Variety declared it Clint's best work as a director. Every review mentioned the darkness, the moral ambiguity, the uncomfortable truths about violence. Everything Warner Brothers had been afraid of became the film's greatest strengths. The box office told the same story of vindication. Unforgiven opened in August 1992 to $15 million. Strong for a dark Western with no young stars and a hard R rating. But then it did something unusual for films this dark and challenging. It held. Week after week, the film kept finding audiences who told their friends this wasn't just another movie. Word of mouth was incredible. People weren't just recommending it. They were insisting their friends see it. This wasn't just another Western. This was something important, something that needed to be witnessed. The film played in theaters for months, an unusual run for any film, but especially for one the studio had considered too dark for mainstream audiences. It crossed $100 million domestically, then kept going. International audiences responded even more strongly to the film's uncompromising vision. By the end of its theatrical run, Unforgiven had grossed $159 million worldwide against its $14 million budget, over 11 times its cost. It was one of the most profitable films of 1992, and proof that audiences were hungry for exactly the kind of challenging adult filmmaking Warner Brothers had been afraid to release. But the real vindication came at the Academy Awards in March 1993. Unforgiven received 9 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Clint, and Best Supporting Actor for Gene Hackman. Warner Brothers executives who'd wanted to change the ending watched, as the film they'd been afraid of became the most honored film of the year. When Gene Hackman won Best Supporting Actor for his role as the brutal sheriff, he thanked Clint for having the courage to tell a difficult story honestly. When the film won Best Film Editing, editor Joel Cox thanked Clint for trusting his vision. When Clint won Best Director, he thanked his crew and his producers, but notably and pointedly didn't thank any studio executives for believing in the film or supporting his vision. He'd believed in it himself. That had been enough. That had always been enough. And when Unforgiven won Best Picture, the biggest award of the night, Clint's acceptance speech was characteristically brief, but loaded with meaning. I've been lucky to work with great people who trusted the story we were telling, who understood what we were trying to say. This film is exactly what it needed to be, and I'm grateful it found its audience. 4 Oscars, $159 million at the box office, universal critical acclaim from every major publication. Everything Warner Brothers had been afraid wouldn't happen with a dark, violent, morally ambiguous Western had happened anyway, proving Clint right and the studio catastrophically wrong. Robert Kellerman had to sit through the Oscar ceremony, watching the film he'd wanted to change sweep the awards. Every win was a reminder that Clint had been right and the studio had been wrong. Again. After that night, Warner Brothers never again suggested changes to a Clint Eastwood film. They'd learned the lesson that should have been obvious from the beginning. When Clint Eastwood says a film is exactly what it needs to be, you trust him. The executives who'd wanted to change Unforgiven quietly moved to less prominent positions within the studio over the next few years. Their judgment had been exposed as flawed. Their instincts about what audiences wanted had been proven wrong, and their attempt to override one of the greatest filmmakers in history had been documented in the most public way possible. At the Academy Awards, the room went silent. This wasn't a negotiating tactic. This was a line in the sand. Clint continued making films for Warner Brothers, but always on his own terms. The Bridges of Madison County, Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, Gran Torino, American Sniper, dozens more films over the following 3 decades, many of them dark and challenging. None of them compromised to satisfy executives who thought they knew better. Unforgiven became not just a great film, but a case study taught in film schools and business programs. The case study of artistic integrity triumphing over commercial calculation. It's the story of a director who was willing to shelve his own film rather than compromise his vision, and a cautionary tale for executives who believe they know better than the artists creating the work. Today, Unforgiven is regarded as one of the greatest Westerns ever made and one of Clint Eastwood's finest achievements. The ending that Warner Brothers wanted to change, dark, violent, uncompromising, is now studied as a perfect example of how to conclude a revisionist Western, demonstrating that sometimes the most powerful move is refusing to compromise on what matters, and that the right choice isn't always the safe choice.